Ringrazio il Ministro Frattini per le numerosissime suggestioni del suo intervento. Intanto accolgo come ottime notizie sia la composizione di questo panel di cui il Ministro ci parlava, voluto da Ban Ki-moon, fondamentale naturalmente per tutte le tematiche legate alla violenza contro le donne, e anche la buona occasione, ottima occasione che il Ministro ci ha annunciato di questo incontro fra i ministri della riva nord e sud del Mediterraneo in programma a Napoli il 28 novembre, il fatto che nell'agenda verrà dedicata un'attenzione specifica proprio ai temi delle pari opportunità di genere. Lo chiamo con questa definizione anche se forse non è la definizione migliore. Ci sono due aspetti, due suggestioni provenienti dall'intervento del Ministro che secondo me coincidono esattamente con il momento in cui diciamo un concorso necessario fra il nord e il sud del Mediterraneo per quello che riguarda le politiche femminili, ovvero la non negoziabilità dei diritti e appunto un passaggio che è prima di tutto culturale, poi politico, da diritti delle donne a diritti della persona, e che anche nel nord del Mediterraneo è un percorso in divenire, non è certamente purtroppo ancora un percorso acquisito, e quindi credo che questi siano due elementi fondamentali sui quali dovremo concentrare il nostro lavoro. Grazie ancora al Ministro Frattini per questo interessantissimo intervento, e adesso vorrei invece invitare a parlare l'amica Boer Buquicchio, Segretario Generale aggiunto del Consiglio d'Europa, che ho particolarmente il piacere di avere qui con noi perché è sempre stata molto attiva e ha messo al centro del suo impegno nel Consiglio d'Europa proprio tutto ciò che è legato alle politiche delle pari opportunità, in particolare alla violenza contro le donne e anche alle politiche legate all'infanzia. Le cedo subito la parola. Grazie molto.
Thank you very much, dear President, dear Deborah. I will speak in English. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. I'm actually very happy to be here today, this morning with you, all the more so since gender equality issues have been at the top of my agenda since I became Deputy Secretary General of the Council of Europe. And although I believe that the issue of women's rights and their situation in society should always be of primary concern to any government, I do recognize that there is today an exceptional window of opportunities to move forward in the South Mediterranean region, and let us not lose this momentum. Let us remember from the outset that ensuring equal rights for women is not only for the benefit of half of the population. In 2002, and we just heard Minister Frattini mention this report, there was this first Arab Human Development Report, which cited the lack of women's rights as one of the three factors most hampering progress in the region, along with lack of political freedoms and poor education. Equality of rights is a matter of justice and fairness, but it also makes hard economic and political sense. Women have emerged as key and equal players in the Arab Spring through protesting, organizing, blogging, and even through hunger strikes. They have taken a central role in the movements for change in the region, and now it remains to be seen if their rights will be formally acknowledged and if their political engagement will lead to governmental and institutional reform and to real change in daily lives and experiences of women in society. And I realize that the realities on the ground are very different from country to country, even within countries and among social classes. It is a challenge to speak of women in general terms and of the southern Mediterranean as if it were a homogenized region. It is not, that's very clear. But the events which took place in this region do, however, point to a common trend. Women activists in the Arab Spring have come from all social groups, since it has been a mass movement starting from the grassroots. This has meant that a whole range of concerns has been put on the agenda, from issues of political representation and legislation affecting women's equality to escaping violence and the call for wages and better employment rights. Across all groups, women's health, literacy, and material well-being have emerged as shared concerns. Another common trend is the role of the media, internet, social networks, in bringing women to the streets and giving them a voice. Women have been inspired by articulate women, anchors on satellite television networks like Al Jazeera. Women can assert leadership roles in cyberspace that men's dominance in the public sphere might have hampered in city squares. Ladies and gentlemen, we are invited to debate over 2 days the role of women as agents of change in the political, economical, and private spheres. Women can only bring about effective and long-lasting change in their countries if they can first participate actively in political and economic life at all levels, governmental, local, through associations, political parties, or trade unions, and in all sectors, and thus see their views incorporated into policy making, and this is the only way of genuinely influencing the future of the countries and their own future. The issue of participation is linked to the fundamental principle of equality between men and women. The instauration of a truly democratic regime, democratic regimes in southern Mediterranean calls for full equality between men and women. And this requires people to radically change their perceptions and to make, in some cases, enormous efforts to change the attitudes toward what are socially and culturally accepted roles. This does not come easy, but gender equality is the first step towards the equality of people and thus the first step toward democracy. The fact that a march of approximately 200 women on International Women's Day in Egypt was jeopardized by groups of men and other examples of intimidation in various continents illustrates that there is no wide acceptance of giving women a larger role in politics and society, or rather there is lack of awareness. But there are everyday signs of progress, and this is what I invite you to focus on today. The objective of this conference is not to draw a catalogue of obstacles, but rather to highlight the progress and the giant leaps that have occurred recently and that inspire us as citizens and policymakers. We've heard many examples. We heard the example of the candidature of Botaina Kamel, running for president in Egypt, the recent constitutional amendment in Morocco, which introduced explicitly the principle of equality between men and women, the elections in Tunisia, where we not only saw, as we just heard, active and very active dynamic participation of women, but also the fact that there is a demand of strict equal proportions of women and men on all lists presented to the polling booth. And, of course, very symbolically, very important, the Nobel Peace Prize, which was just of which Minister Frattini reminded just a moment ago, and which is, of course, symbolic, but it's also very important that this expressed the great potential that women can represent for peace and democracy. The Arab Spring and its flavor for change is having an impact well beyond the geographical borders of the southern Mediterranean. Traditionally, conservative countries such as Kuwait and Saudi Arabia have experienced positive changes with the inclusion of women in the public spheres. In May 2010, I had the privilege to attend the ceremony of the North-South Centre, awarding the North-South Prize to Rola Dashti, a leading activist in Kuwait, well known throughout the Middle East region for her advocacy of democratic reform and gender equality. And she was one of the first 4 women ever to win a seat in Parliament of Kuwait. I am convinced that the expertise and experience of the Council of Europe can be of added values to our debates. As early as 1979, the Council of Europe has established its first intergovernmental committee to promote equality between women and men. And since then, we have been in the forefront in pushing forward the debate and concrete action on subjects such as violence against women, trafficking in human beings, gender mainstreaming, positive action, balanced participation in decision-making, and national machinery for equality. Over the last 30 years, a lot has been achieved, but much more remains to be done, and I believe that the starting point must be a solid legal framework, and in some countries this still needs to be achieved. But even when the legal basis exists, we cannot be complacent in believing that real equality of rights and opportunities will follow. We must close the gap between de jure and de facto equality. This is true everywhere, also in Europe. Progress is slow, and in my view, we cannot afford to believe that change will happen alone. Our work in the Council of Europe is based on legally binding instruments, which are a solid basis for progress in specific fields of action. Many of these conventions are open to non-European countries, and the most recent example is the Convention on Preventing and Combating Violence Against Women and Domestic Violence, which was opened for signature in May 2011. And if we want to add to the concrete results of our debates here in Rome, an important element, that would be that that states represented here from the southern shore of the Mediterranean declare an interest in acceding to this groundbreaking treaty, which is open to non-member states of the Council of Europe, and which covers the whole range of acts of violence of which women can be victims. I leave that for your consideration. Ladies and gentlemen, the Council of Europe is currently developing a new neighbourhood policy through which its unique expertise in the fields of human rights, democracy and the rule of law could be of support in the context of democratic changes in the southern Mediterranean. And this support can include legislative expertise, very important, as Minister Frattini again mentions, constitutional reform. We have the Venice Commission who provides the necessary expertise, always at the demand of those who ultimately can benefit from the changes. Capacity building, awareness raising on specific issues such as violence against women, trafficking. And I do not want to anticipate what the President of the Parliamentary Assembly will say. Actually, I thought he would speak before me, but I'm sure he will mention also the Partnership for Democracy, which is also, but I leave that a very important element. I leave that to the President of the Parliamentary Assembly. And then finally, the North-South Centre, of whom you are President, dear Deborah. I want to thank you in particular for the initiative of this conference and for having made the promotion of equality between men and women one of the priorities of the Trans-Mediterranean programme since its launch in 1994. The Centre can play an essential role as a platform for discussions and for monitoring the recommendations coming out of this conference, as well as creating a network, very important, of the person and institutions present here today. So, ladies and gentlemen, let us be ambitious and bold. We all have seen the images of women in the streets asking for change. Seeing is not enough. We have to demonstrate in the next 2 days that we have also heard and understood their messages, and that we stand alongside them. Let's make sure we make progress and do not slip back at this decisive moment. Thank you for your attention.